Today we're continuing with the 50 NL hand review. Those of you who saw the first part will understand this. I might be slurping a bit throughout the video. My voice was certainly cracking towards the end of the first part. But, yep, there are a few more hands to go through, but if we don't get through more today, we're likely not going to finish a series, or finish a lot of hands, because I don't want my content to be all the same, really. So without further ado, let's get on with it. Here, Ace King fairly standard open in middle position, and we get 3-bet by the button. We're 250 big blinds deep, and if this were a deep ante game, I think there would be enough dynamics in the population to possibly 4-bet, 6-bet this, or at least 4-bet and call a 5-bet. Though I'm not sure about the merits of that. I'm not a deep ante player, so I would have to get someone else to look at that, who is a deep ante player. I have some people who could confirm that for me. Either way, I think at Zoom, I think flattening out of position is best here, because fundamentally we can't expect people to, although we expect people to have a 4-bet flattening range in position, and that's the main argument for 4-betting. We don't expect people to 5-bet wider than aces or aces and kings, because they're used to playing 100 big blinds deep. So, and that's the reason why we flat here. I think we can see he's used to playing 100 big blinds deep by his 3-bet sizing. Given the stack depth, I'd like to see that being a bit bigger. So we flop top pair, top kicker, fairly standard check call on a flop, and it's notable that he bets fairly small. I think I mentioned last video about wanting to make people defend a lot of their range when it's weak, and I think that might be partly to do with it. But it's also notable that over a pretty decent sample, he's c-betting an incredible amount. So I don't think I have any really relevant stats for 3-bet pots, 5 out of 7. So he's likely tending towards his single raise pot stat, but either way. And here, I think this is a card which we shouldn't donk. A 7 is fine for us to donk, possibly not, because we don't know. Actually, that's in a single raise pot. If we'd flatted out position, a 7 would be good for us to donk here, because we have 7x in our range, whereas the button doesn't. If this were a single raise pot and we'd flashed in the big blind, for instance, after c-betting. But here, I think this aids both ranges roughly equally, because both people have king x, especially given a lot of his 3-bet bluffs. They like to be like king queen off, or sometimes stuff like king deuce suited. So I think it's a good spot to check call again. And we river essentially the nuts. We're beaten by aces, and I think at first it's popped through my head that I might consider folding this river at some stage. Indeed, those of you who frequent the micro stakes no limit forum on 2+2 will know that I posted this hand here. But ultimately, I think he plays aces differently. I think he doesn't bet the turn most of the time, and often he sizes the flop. I think at this limit, most people still have sizing tells, fairly significant sizing tells, in fact, so in general you can assume that a smaller bet is a weaker part of their range. As for donking the river, I think it's likely not very good. If we thought he was going to make a bad call with, say, ace deuce suited, then I think donking is probably better than checking, because he's going to check those hands behind. But A, I don't think he has hands like ace queen pre, and B, I don't expect people to make bad calls like that here, because it's very tough for them to see what we can be bluffing with. And although I know you've probably seen the 200 NL guys saying, oh no, all 50 NL players suck, in general they can hand read. We don't have any bluffs here, and they know that. So, and villain knows that. So, if we donk, it basically turns our hand face up as king queen or better, king jack or better maybe. So I think checking river is fairly mandatory, and villain bets, and because as I mentioned before, we have essentially the nuts here. Villain very rarely has aces, if ever. The plan is to raise call. The issue is the sizing. I think because villain is essentially caps at king queen, maybe king jack off, whatever. We should size fairly small, because he's not going to expect us to bluff often here. I don't think balance concepts are particularly relevant. So considering we very rarely have any bluffs anyway, I think even from a balance perspective, this would be better off as a small raise. I mean, maybe we could turn like jacks into a bluff, but that's just whatever. So I think the optimal sizing is probably slightly more than clipping it back. I'd say something between 36 and 38, and then obviously calling a shove. Just to induce crying calls from king queen, king jack type hands. So yeah, we make it 37. I swear I don't remember the hand that well. So saying 36, 38 wasn't. Oh look at how great I am. And he folds, but still, I think it's an important point for two reasons. The river sizing is important, and also remembering not to get scared of ace in this spot. So it's a fairly simple hand. The deep stacks make it slightly more interesting, especially pre. But I think that flop and turn are completely standard. Well, flop turn river are very standard, but they're still merit talking about. 8-7 suited standard open for middle position. I mean, you can fold it, whatever. It doesn't really matter. But I'd open it as a standard. So, and we get a 3-bet small. I think a mistake a lot of people make is over adjusting against small 3-bets. They flat too much or 4-bet too much because they think that villain making it big blind smaller means it has to defend an extremely significant amount of their range compared to normal, and that's wrong. I'm not going to go into the maths in detail right now, at least, but the main point is that essentially that big blind difference makes very little difference to the odds villain is giving himself on a bluff, and therefore we don't need to make changes too large to our continuance ranges. I think given the deep stacks villain is making a big mistake in sizing this large, because we can basically call with anything playable, and it's going to make the hand much tougher for him post flop with all of his range. And that's the reason why we're calling here. We flop an open ender on a pretty wet board, and we against the size C bets, I don't think we really want to check raising range anyway here. We can have 6s and 5s given stack sizes, and at a stretch a6 suited and ace5 suited. But I think let's play better as a call anyway, because villain's likely going to want to barrel this texture pretty often, because in general it's more favourable for his range than ours. And furthermore, we don't really want to play our spades as raises here. The reason being that given his sizing and given his likely range pre, I think people are often 3-betting mostly ace-x suited pre in this spot. I don't expect us to have an inordinate amount of bluffs here, though of course we can see that change by turn river action. And he possibly has like some king queen off, king jack off type hands. So we call here, turn pair to board. Obviously this reduces the number of value combos we have significantly, and it's because we have very little in the way of naked 6x in our range. It's probably a better turn for villain's range than ours. So he's perfectly justified in barreling if he wants to. So I expect him to barrel Ace King, Ace Queen if he has it. A lot of spade hands, not all spade hands though, and anything else which looks like a value hand really, or wasn't backdoor spades on the flop. I expect him to give up with like King Queen with a Queen of Spades or King of Spades now. And so he checks back. I kind of think he can also have badly played weak Ace X and King X in his range. I think that would be a bad way to play those hands because it would make his checking range too weak, and also it's tough for him to get value in that spot on the flop, especially 3 streets of value. On the river we have a nut bottom of our range. It should be a fairly elementary bluff. We don't block his folding range at all really. So I think this is certainly pretty much the best pass for range to bluff with. The issue is the sizing, because villain's range is capped because of the turn jack back, and also I don't expect him to size the way he did on a flop with aces. I think fairly large is good because it allows us to bluff often, and on this texture we're likely going to have a lot of bluffs. So I'd bet about $18 here, I think. I think that's probably the best sizing, and we bet $16. I think that's a little bit small, but it's probably okay. And villain folds. So, again, another standard hand, well, standard-ish. Pre-flop could be debatable, as could the flop, and the river, in fact. But I think all of those are quite clearly the best option, and it's just an interesting hand for. Not because there are any borderline spots, but because the reasoning used can be quite useful to people watching the video. Hand 3 of the video, I think. We have Ace King of Diamonds under the gun, standard open, middle position calls, and this should be a very strong range. I have some pretty decent notes on this guy, but none of them are relevant to the hand, so I'm not going to mention them, but it's notable that we can take his stats with fairly decent, fairly accurate, and I think the guy's very likely to win at the limits. He plays well, is essentially it, and it folds around. We flop huge, top pair, top kicker with the nut flush draw. And although I've mentioned it's nice to protect our checking range by having some King X in our range on this type of board, by having some diamonds in our range, I think this hand is just far too strong to check. We get so much value from so many worse hands that weaker diamonds, King X, possibly queens through tens. He should have those pre, and possibly like 10-9 suited, though I don't think that's a good call pre. Given he should only really have 9s for value here, if he raises, I expect him to flat all of his range on this board, which is good because it also lets us realise our equity with our bluffs, which is another reason why we want to bet fairly often. So bet 225, I think that's likely a bit small. I'd like to see 250, 275 here. Because it's not a dry board, he's going to want to call with a lot of his range, and I think he's likely not paying enough attention to distinguish between our ranges for betting 275 and 225 here. So he calls, and again, turn makes the board significantly wetter. He could certainly have some backdoor hearts in his range, like Ace Queen of Hearts, Ace Jack of Hearts, and I think this turn is another clear value bet. We could still get value from King Queen suited. I think King Queen off is a fold pre for him. Possibly King Jack suited if he has it pre. And still some diamond draws like Queen 10 of Diamonds. Some Queen Jack of Diamonds more likely. Some heart draws. And he very rarely has better. I think deuces is a fold pre in his spot. So yeah, it's a fairly standard borrow for value. He raises the turn very small. Now, this is quite a tough spot because we are now behind his value range. It's a really narrow value range, really, really narrow. He's basically pocket nines, or badly played pocket deuces. I mean, there are some people who will flat everything pre they won't 3-bet aces or kings, but I don't think that's a significant thing to worry about, especially without blockers. The thing is, we also block a lot of his draws, and that's going to be relevant for the river. And also we don't expect him to spaz to spaz very much, given how strong our range looks. So although I think this is definitely a call, because we have so much equity against all his made hands, or whatever made hands he has, I think we can give him 6 combos of made hands maximum. I think we do have to be wary, because I don't think he should be bluffing very often in this spot either. So we call and the river's a blank. Fairly standard check. And villain bets fairly large. I think we should call this with a lot of King X, but I think this is pretty much the worst King X combo in our range to call with, just because he's polarized, so which King X we have doesn't really matter, and we block so many draws. We block all his diamonds. We block a lot of diamonds. He can still have like Queen Jack of diamonds, I guess, but and also a lot of the heart combos, Ace Queen of Hearts, Ace Jack of Hearts, are basically the only 2 heart combos which he can have Queen Jack of Hearts maybe. So he doesn't actually have that many bluffs. And also I expect people in general to be a bit value heavy in this spot, not excessively, but certainly I expect them to have more value combos than average and bluff combos. So I think we can call with like King Queen of Spades here, although turn is certainly marginal in that spot. But I think we can fold this and certainly defend often enough. Furthermore, I think folding him, we do better against his range when we call with something else. So I think folding is the best play here. This hand, pocket 4's in a big blind. This guy, he's a pretty awful reg. Sorry if you're watching. And opens under the gun in this guy, who I don't know much about, but he seems fairly loose. Flats on a button. We call him a big blind. Fairly standard. Flop 10-5-4 2-zone. We flop bottom sets. There's certainly an argument for donking here. However, because both these guys, this guy's c-betting probably a bit too much. I know all the old c-betting articles, which lots of people get their c-betting strategy from, recommend c-betting around 70-75%, which is far too much. I think if you want to play a loosely balanced game, c-betting about 4 to 5% would be optimal. I think people play badly against c-bets at the micro stakes, so we don't want to c-bet that little, but based on my experience, I don't think they play so badly that we can just c-bet 80% or whatever and make money, and still be a winner at the limit, in fact. So I think about 55% is probably good, and also this guy is significantly too aggressive in lots of other spots as well. So I think, given this guy seems laggy and he's been aggressive over the small sample so far, we can expect one of these two to bet often enough that we want to be check raising most of our stuff rather than donk betting. Unfortunately, checks through. I mean, so we have a very standard bet on the turn. I think about $2.75 to $3 is best, and we get called by the button. He can have plenty of draws here. He could possibly have pocket 10s, but that's the only hand he has which beats his. He can also have some 10x, possibly like Ace Jack, 9s, 8s, Ace Queen, possibly Ace King. Yeah, I don't expect us to have much else, possibly 9-8 suited, although I expect us to bet the flop a lot of the time with that. And River's a Jack, the Jack of Spades notably. If he checks the flop with any flush draws they got there, if he calls a turn with a jack, his now trips. And notably, a lot of the rest of his range is now very weak. Pretty much the only thing that he can call with if we bet that he may not bet himself is whatever 10x he chooses to check back the flop with. And I don't think that's very much. Possibly ace-10 of spades, although that's a flush. So I think we should probably be checking, because he probably calls a raise wider than he raises. And yeah, I think the key point to take from this hand, before I go further, is that you shouldn't always bet your strong hands when villain is very likely to bet with everything this is calling with. I mean, we're behind a very small amount of the time here. So Jack 10 and 10s, although Jack 10 raises the turn sometimes, 10s bets the flop a fair amount. So I think we can probably check raise call here, because he can shove with nut flushes, he can shove with bluffs, whatever. I mean, we check and he checks back, but he has ace queen, and he's not calling a bet with that, or at least he's not unless it's extremely bad, basically. Because his range for calling this hand is pretty strong in this spot, and he just doesn't need to call this, and I'm not sure he's even ahead of all of our bluffs. We can probably bluff like 6-4 here. So yeah, I think that the most important thing to take from that hand is a river check raise, though the donking slash check raise flop decision is also quite interesting. Sorry about that. This guy in a motorcycle drives past my window at 20 past 6 every morning. Hand in which we have Jack 10 suited in the small blind. Pre is pretty marginal considering this guy's fairly tight. However, he's not particularly positionally aware either, and would like to go and see the flop 3-way, if not 4-way. This guy's in it, so he's not going to squeeze very wide. And our hand's super playable even though it's position. So we see the flop 4-way. We flop top pair, but we don't really want to best. We don't really want to donk. It's not quite strong enough, and it checks through. Turn is a queen again. We don't really want to donk. We don't really want to bet because our hand ultimately isn't that strong. And a pre-flop raise of bets. Notably, he can't really have jacks here. He can't really have queen. He can't really have sets including pocket queens. He can't really have jack 9. So his range for betting is basically queen x here and bluffs. However, considering we're 4-way and the board's very wet, I don't expect him to be bluffing often. With that said, I think our hand is a little bit too strong to fold, especially considering we have, against queen x we have what, 3, 5, 9 out once, and we are sometimes ahead. River to 8s, and check folding is a perfectly reasonable option because he nearly always has queen x when he bets his river. However, I think check raising is probably better. Because he nearly always has queen x, we can just about have ace x, and we would always raise ace x considering his range. And most importantly, people won't be perceived to bluff this river very often, so he's not going to feel very comfortable calling with the top of his range, which is ace queen. So that's the reason, and also he shouldn't really ever have ace x himself. We can have some missed hearts, but I think he's still going to fold anyway because we will be perceived to bet the turn a significant amount of time with those missed hearts, and in fact we will. So it's very tough for us to have bluffs here. And because this is close to the bottom of our range, it also makes a very good bluff. So check raise to 18 and he folds. And we do need to make it a reasonable size there because we are looking to fold out top pair by repping a pretty narrow range. This hand, ace queen, not in the cutoff, standard open, standard flush for 3-bet in position. We've only seen this guy 3-bet queens in a similar spot before, and we flop a very strong hand. Excuse me, voice is going. And he c-bets, which we expect him to do with a significant amount of his range. Fairly small, but that's fine on this board texture. And I think any option but calling is pretty bad. We really don't rep a wide range by raising. In fact, I'm not sure we have any value hands on this flop if we raise, so I think we really don't want to raising range at all. So calling is clear. It sounds interesting. He bets again, which we expect him to do with all his value hands, possibly some bluffs. It doesn't really matter. But because we don't really have any specific reason on how often he's bluffing, we can elect either to take a population explosive line, so assume that 50 NL players are either bluffing more or less than optimal in this situation, or we can attempt to call on unexplosively. Now this hand is clearly within an unexplosible calling range. Again, I'm not going to do the maths right here, but I think the unexplosible calling range was something like Ace 10 plus, Ace 10 suited plus, and again we can river showdown. We can river showdown value with this hand pretty easily. If we river an ace, we have a strong value hand. A queen we can call a bet with, and we can probably bet if checks too as well. Although it gets a bit marginal. However, the population read would suggest that people don't borrow this turn card nearly often enough, especially considering we block diamonds. It's much better for his range than it is for ours, and yet I don't see him bluffing too often. Think about it. Those of you who play these decks, if you have say 9-8 suited here, are you going to borrow this turn very often? And I think the answer is probably no. You're not. So I think we should probably be making an exploitative fold here, especially considering, given he's uncapped and we're capped on this texture, he's going to be shoving a lot of his bluffs on river. But we elect to call, which again I think is fine considering it's pretty much unexploitable. It's unexploitable, but I think we can definitely be folding exploitatively there. And on river he shoves and we fold, which I think is fine. We can't call that shove for obvious reasons. It falls outside an unexploitable calling range at this stage, and essentially that's the reason we fold. In fact, I've just noticed this is the last hand we have, so I'm actually going to go through the maths just to show you roughly how to do it. Okay, so I'm just going to open it. Sorry about my voice. I haven't had enough to drink today. I know, it's very silly. So I'm just going to open up Equilab. Wow. And we're going to get up a card matrix. We're going to try and make it a bit smaller, though seems we can't. Let's try and move that out of the way. Okay, so villain 3 bets, and our range for defending 3 bets is likely to be like our range for flatting 3 bets is likely to be something like possibly not King 10 suited. Probably a little bit wider than this. That looks about right. Okay, so let's give us this range for flashing 3 bet. So we have roughly 98 combos, and if we assume a 25% opening range, we're probably defending about enough considering we're 4 betting aces, a roughly 6% range. In fact, we could probably fold 7s and possibly 10-9 suited, although I think leaving them in mix is just about fine as well. So on this flop versus the C bets, it's very small. It's roughly 40% pots. He needs it to work 4 into 14. 1 times 3.5, about 28% of the time to immediately show a profit, to immediately break even, and that's forgetting the equity he has on terms. Considering we're going to defend by calling exclusively, we probably need to defend about 78% of our range, I'd guess. Although that's just a guess. I'm just going to say it's clearly above 72%. It's clearly above 70% of the percentage of our range we need to defend. So we can fold enough to get down to roughly let's say 75 combos that we can fold. So if we just fold we can fold 22, 23 combos to get down to 75. So if we just fold the weakest parts of our range, we have we're going to defend all of these which have a diamond or a hearts, which are diamonds or hearts. So we can fold about 17 combos more. So we can also probably just fold King Queen off, except when it has a diamond. Whoops, wrong way around. There we go. So we can fold King Queen off, except where it has a diamond. We can extend this to King Jack suited, and we can also fold seven combos more. So let's fold I don't know, Ace 10 suited and a few Ace Jack offsuit combos. Oh, actually, we're obviously going to be defending Ace 10 suited with diamonds or hearts, so we can probably fold a few more Ace Jack combos. Let's say we're always going to be calling with a diamond, and let's see how that looks. Okay, so it says 74 combos, that'll do. So that's what we're calling the flop with, and I'm just going to okay that and actually enter the flop in Equilab. Just so the card removal works. I probably should have done that beforehand, but what was it, 6-4 I think, yeah. And so here we have, I don't think card removal actually makes an effect on a flop because we don't have any 6x or 4x in our range. So 6 of spades turn. Where are we? Turn 6 of spades. And he borrows, let's call that 55% pots. So we need to defend at least 65% and probably more. Let's say we need to defend 70% of our remaining range. Let's say we need to defend. Let's just say we need to defend 2/3 because 55% probably means we need to defend like 62%. Though I'm not. If you don't understand where I'm getting these numbers from, essentially, okay, so to call on unexploitably, we need to have essentially 0 EV with his bluffs, or a maximum of 0 EV with his zero equity bluffs. So let's say Villain bets 50% pot. He's guessing 2-1 on a fold, so he needs it to work 33% of the time to break even immediately. Because he's likely going to be able to realise some of his equity when he's called, we want to call more than that 33%. So let's say if he bets half pot on a wet flop, we want to fold at most 25% of our range. Although for other reasons, he's probably not going to bet half pot on wet flops very often. So that's why we need to call with these numbers. I'm not just pulling them out of thin air. So yeah, let's say we can fold a third. Third of 74 is 28, I think. No, just under 25. Let's say 25 combos we can fold. So we want about 50 combos left. Obviously we're not folding pairs, but we're probably just not continuing with any of our weaker no pair hands. Yeah, so our calling range should look roughly like that on its own. I misremembered the calculation slightly. I thought it was ace 10 suited plus, but it's actually ace jack suited plus. It's not a big deal. Still, ace queen suited is quite clearly in that range, especially ace queen of diamonds, because it's pretty much the best of these no pair combos to call with. And of course, this changes if you don't have sevens in your range pre. So you probably need to call more no pair hands if you have sevens in your range pre. So we call the turn, he shoves the river, he's betting 13 to 40, so he's guessing, crap, 1/3 to 1, so we need 1 into 2 and 2 1/3, which is about 42%, I think. I could be completely off base there, but still, considering we expect it to be polarized and all of these hands are bluff catches on the river, we can just fold 42% of our range. So that is 21 combos. So in effect we have to call with any pair on the river, or any pocket pair on the river, which we're not delighted with. And in fact we might be better off calling with ace queen than some of the pocket pairs, because you block aces and queens, or better off calling with ace king, and we don't expect us to bluff those hands. So in fact, I think that was our range. Yeah, I think we're probably better off folding, doing that, calling with that range, because we have blockers on the river with ace queen, and it has effectively the same value. If villain is bluffing with ace king, which he definitely shouldn't be, then obviously 9s through 7s become much better to call with. But when you can block villain's value betting range without blocking his bluffing range to a significant degree, which I think we do here, because we expect him to. Excuse me. We expect him to call most broadways pre, so he doesn't have those as bluffs. You should, especially if the hand has effectively the same value as it does on the river. So that is essentially how I would design unexploitable ranges for this hand, and in fact I think we would be calling ace queen on the river unexploitably, as we've seen. But again, I think considering he's going to be so value heavy in this spot, people don't fire triple barrel bluffs willy-nilly in 3-bet pots at this limit. Or not many do, so we can assume the population doesn't. We can assume on average this guy has less than enough triple barrel bluffs. I think we have to be happy folding this. And yeah, I think I hope that's been helpful. In fact, I might ask this to be uploaded first. Ask for this to be uploaded first, because that passage could be more useful for people before us. Because I do, over the course of the 2 videos, I do some unexploitability maths, which this basically explains. I hope it explains. I will do a lecture on it at some stage, but that's essentially a way to. This is essentially explaining it in short. So yeah, I may get this uploaded first. I hope the videos have been useful. and I should probably have noted that if you already know that, then there was nothing else left. But yeah, I didn't. So for me, anyway, I hope the 2 videos have been useful to all of you. Please leave feedback. Tell me what you'd like to see. I'm all ears. I'm happy to create any sort of video, really. Well, within reason. I can't create PLO videos because I'm terrible at PLO. But I'm happy to create any no limit hold'em videos within my competency. So yeah. Thanks. This has been the Deafness article for Grinder School. Have a nice day and good luck at the tables.